percent see failure as a reason to stop, while the 1% see it as a lesson, a stepping stone to something greater. The people who make it in life aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who refuse to quit when they do. Every setback, every mistake, every rejection is teaching something valuable. But most people are too focused on their disappointment to see the lesson. Most people are afraid of failure because they've been taught to fear it. From a young age, they're told that failing is bad, that making mistakes means they aren't good enough. So they avoid taking risks, they play it safe, they never step outside their comfort zone. But the 1% understand that failure isn't the end, it's just feedback. It's information that helps them adjust, improve, and come back stronger. The biggest difference between those who succeed and those who don't is how they respond to failure. The 99% take it personally. They let it define them. If something doesn't work out, they start believing they're not cut out for success. They tell themselves, maybe this isn't for me, and they walk away. But the 1% don't see failure as a reflection of who they are. They don't make it personal. They analyze it, figure out what went wrong, and try again with a new approach. Failure is only permanent if you stop trying. The 99% give up too soon. They expect things to work perfectly the first time, and when they don't, they assume they're on the wrong path. But success doesn't happen overnight. It's built through trial and error, through persistence, through learning from mistakes. The 1% don't get discouraged when things don't go as planned. They understand that every failure is just a temporary setback, not a final destination. Some of the most successful people in the world have failed more times than most people have even tried. They didn't let those failures break them. They used them as fuel. They kept going when others would have quit. The 99% look at successful people and only see the highlight reel, the wins, the achievements, the success stories. They don't see the rejections, the failures, the struggles that came before the breakthrough. Fear of failure keeps most people stuck. They don't even try because they're afraid of looking foolish, of making mistakes, of not getting it right. But the 1% embrace failure because they know it's the price of growth. They understand that every time they fail, they are one step closer to success. They don't waste time dwelling on what went wrong. They focus on what they can do better next time. The 99% want guarantees before they take action. They want to be sure that they won't fail, that things will work out exactly as planned. But that's not how life works. The 1% take risks, knowing that failure is a possibility, but they don't let that stop them. They take the leap anyway, knowing that even if they fall, they'll learn something valuable. Rejection, loss, and setbacks are all part of the journey. The 99% see them as reasons to stop. The 1% see them as necessary steps towards success. They don't let one failure define their entire future. They understand that the only true failure is quitting, and as long as they keep going, they're still in the game. The lessons learned from failure are often the very things that lead to success. The key is to keep learning, keep adjusting, and keep moving forward no matter what happens. Discipline is the key to success because motivation is temporary. Motivation is like a spark. It gets you excited, it gives you energy, but it burns out fast. That's why so many people start something with enthusiasm but never finish. They wake up one day feeling inspired, ready to take on the world, but as soon as that feeling fades, they stop. The 99% rely on motivation, but the 1% rely on discipline. They don't wait until they feel like doing the work. They do it because they made a commitment to themselves. Discipline is what keeps you moving when motivation is gone. It's easy to work hard when you're excited. It's easy to stay focused when things are going well. But what about the days when you're tired, frustrated, or discouraged? That's where discipline separates the successful from the unsuccessful. The 1% show up no matter how they feel. They don't make excuses. They don't wait for inspiration. They put in the work, whether they feel like it or not. Most people fail because they let their emotions control their actions. They do things based on how they feel in the moment instead of sticking to the plan. They say they want success, But as soon as they get tired or bored, they stop. The 1% don't let their feelings dictate their actions. They follow through even when it's inconvenient. They understand that consistency beats intensity. It's not about working hard for a few days. It's about showing up every single day, even when no one is watching. The 99% struggle with discipline because they expect instant results. They put in effort for a short time, but when they don't see immediate success, they lose interest. They start looking for shortcuts, quick fixes, or an easier way. But the 1% know that real success comes from long-term commitment. They trust the process. They don't rush results because they understand that great things take time. Discipline is about making sacrifices. The 99% want success, but they also want comfort. They want to reach their goals without giving up anything. But success doesn't work that way. The 1% are willing to make tough choices. They sacrifice distractions, bad habits, and temporary pleasures for long-term rewards. They understand that every decision they make is either bringing them closer to their goal or pulling them further away. Most people struggle with discipline because they rely too much on willpower. They think they can just force themselves to do the right thing in the moment, but willpower fades, especially when temptation is strong. The 1% don't just rely on willpower. They build systems and routines that make success automatic. They create habits that remove the need for decision making. They set up their environment in a way that makes discipline easier. The 99% make excuses. They blame their circumstances, their past, or their lack of resources. They convince themselves that they can't be consistent because life gets in the way. But the 1% don't look for excuses, they look for solutions. They take responsibility for their actions. They know that discipline is a choice, and they make that choice daily. The difference between success and failure is simple. Are you willing to do the work even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when no one is there to push you? The 1% don't let excuses win. They don't let temporary emotions dictate their long-term success. They understand that discipline is the bridge between goals and achievements. It's what turns dreams into reality, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. Risk is the price of reward. The 99% want success, but they don't want to take risks. They want security, comfort, and guarantee. The 1% understand that every great achievement requires stepping into the unknown. They don't wait until everything is safe before they move. They take the leap, knowing that risk is part of the process. Most people fear risk because they fear failure. They ask, what if it doesn't work? What if I lose everything? What if people laugh at me? But the 1% ask a different question. What if it does work? What if I succeed beyond my wildest dreams? What if this risk changes my life? They focus on the possibilities, not the fears. The 99% play it safe. They take the predictable path, the one with the least resistance. They choose jobs they don't love because they're secure. They stay in situations that don't fulfill them because they're comfortable. They never bet on themselves because they're afraid of what might happen if they fail. The 1% take calculated risks. They weigh the options, but they don't let fear stop them. They understand that nothing great comes from staying in the same place. The truth is, life itself is a risk. There are no guarantees in anything. You can work a safe job and still get laid off. You can stay in your comfort zone and still struggle. Playing it safe doesn't mean avoiding failure. It just means settling for less. The 1% refuse to settle. They'd rather take the risk of failing than the risk of never trying. Taking risks doesn't mean being reckless. The 1% don't just jump without a plan. They prepare, they strategize, but they don't let overthinking stop them from taking action. The 99% get stuck in analysis paralysis. They spend so much time thinking about every possible outcome that they never actually do anything. The 1% take the first step, then adjust as they go. They trust themselves to figure things out along the way. Fear of risk is what keeps most people trapped in mediocrity. They never start the business, never take the opportunity, never follow their dreams because they're too afraid of losing. But the 1% see risk differently. They know that every risk carries a lesson. Even if they fail, they gain experience, knowledge, and resilience. They know that each risk they take makes them stronger, smarter, and better prepared for the next opportunity. The 99% wait for the perfect moment. They tell themselves, I'll take the risk when I have more money, more time, more experience. But the perfect moment never comes. There will always be uncertainty. The 1% know that waiting is just another way of saying no. They take action now, knowing that they can adjust and grow along the way. Risk is what separates the dreamers from the doers. The 99% have dreams, but they keep them locked away because they're too afraid to take a chance. Knowing that success requires stepping outside of comfort, they don't just think about what they want, they go after it, knowing that the biggest risk of all is spending a life wondering what could have been.